Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You have given us a very clear image of Saudi Arabia as a modern country, modernizing. You've also, by the same token, showed us one of the best examples of modern Saudi Arabia in your own explanations and in the career that you have followed. You've underlined several dimensions, the spiritual one, being the birthplace of Islam, the economic one, oil producer that is trying to change, to transform his wealth into to the benefit of the population, and the strategic location of your country. So it's good for Europeans, and that's my feeling at least, to be reminded from time to time about history and geography, or will to integrate and to forget the past, as sometimes made us forget about the lessons of the past. So it's good to have friends who come and remind us friendlily, in a friendly manner about that. I think you've also underlined that in a changing world, you're a steady player and a solid, a statu quo power, that you have, like many of other countries, a young generation to take care of. Therefore, that education is fundamental. And I know, for having been there, that you've made remarkable progress in terms of education of your youth, be they women or men. And finally, I think this sense of responsibility will make you an unavoidable player in terms of creating a regional order that is much in need in your region. So, if I may now, I'll open the floor for questions. If you want more paper. Next. Yes, sir, over there. You can go to a mic on the...
My name is Usman Khalid, and I'm from Birkbeck in London, but today I'll be speaking as a Pakistani. You know, you're saying that the region has been facing a lot of troubles from terrorism and all these things. When we look at the region, we see that Iran is responsible for all that because it's been giving asylum to, you know, keeping the Taliban's TTIP from Pakistan. Al-Qaeda is there. It's been financing the Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas, you know, everything, and created trouble throughout the Middle East, even in Yemen. And I don't think that it will be long enough that it will start even financing Daesh in that area, and even want to wipe out the people regardless of their ethnicity or religion, whatever it is about. It's really, you know, it denies Holocaust. It says several things. It wants to create the Persian Empire back, and then it will be again Greek versus the Persians. It has created this instability throughout the Middle East. Even in Afghanistan, it's been financing Taliban over there, creating a lot of problems, not just in the Gulf region. It even includes Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan. And what do you think that how the Saudi Arabia in particular can cooperate, you know, with the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world is ready to, you know, work with Saudi Arabia. You got even regional partners. And even,
I think we understand the question.
All right, so
Thank
even
you very much.
regional partners, maybe in Europe or Israel, so you can cooperate a lot with them.
Thank you.
And what about, you know, to solve this before, just last time, to solve this before, you know, what about this Palestinian-Israeli conflict? How are you going to address that one? Because another important thing. Thank you, sir.
Julian.
Thank you very much. Julian Barnes-Dacey with the European Council on Foreign Relations. I wonder if you could give me your perspective on latest developments in Syria and how the kingdom sees that going forward. I think internally, obviously, the Assad regime has consolidated itself in many ways. The Iranians and the Russians are very strong. The recent Kerry-Lavrov meetings in Moscow, I presume, would have aroused some concern amongst backers of the opposition. You have Turkey, which is seemingly moving closer to the Russians, more concerned with the Kurdish issue than the Assad issue, to the backdrop of the coup, etc. It's not a great moment for those that are looking to see Assad gone. How do you read that? What should be done? And what was the message that you gave Europeans here in your meetings with them? I mean, is there a role for Europe?
if you allow me, why don't I do what I didn't do in the beginning, which is address the challenges one by one, and I think this will take care, because 3 of them were contained in the 3 questions that I received. With Turkey, I think Turkey is an extremely important country. It's a pivotal country in the region. It's an anchor for stability, and in terms of the balance of power vis-à-vis Iran. It's a critical player in terms of supporting the moderate opposition in Syria, a stable, secure, peaceful, prosperous Turkey is a positive contribution to the region. And we have no doubt that Turkey will be able to overcome the effects of the failed coup very, very quickly. So in that sense, I think we don't see what has played out in Turkey as affecting stability in the region, and we don't really see much in terms of implications. We think the Turks have the situation under control, and they'll be able to overcome this. With regards to the situation in Syria, the situation in Iran, maybe I'll take a step back and talk about the challenges that biggest challenges that our region faces. 1, Iranian adventurism. 2, sectarianism. 3, terrorism. 4, lack of peace between Israel and Palestinians. 5, developmental issues. And the order I just gave, you can change them any way you want. A lot of the problems we have in our region go back to Iran and its policies. When you look at sectarianism in the Middle East, it's virtually non-existent until the Khomeini Revolution in 1979, when Iran, the Islamic Republic, was established with the principle of exporting the revolution enshrined in its constitution, and with the principle of not accepting nationality as a basis for citizenship, but looking at ethnicity. Iran basically said, any Shia anywhere in the world belongs to me, which is ridiculous. And this was a license to, between exporting the revolution and being responsible for Shia around the world, it caused Iran to interfere in the affairs of countries around the Islamic world, which triggered a reaction in the Sunni world, and we ended up with extremist Sunni groups. The first sectarian terrorist group to be established was Hezbollah in Lebanon. And since its establishment, it has been a force for evil in Lebanon, not a force for good. It has hijacked the system. The Lebanese political system is paralyzed because of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is there because of Iran. That's who established it, that's who funds it, that's who directs it. When you look at the situation in Syria, we have people who decided they have had enough with a brutal dictator. They wanted change. His response to them was killing and rape and torture. And so there was a groundswell of opposition to him, and he couldn't deal with it. So he asked the Iranians for help, and they brought in the Revolutionary Guards, they brought in Hezbollah, they brought in sectarian militias from Pakistan and Afghanistan, and they also failed. So then he brought in the Russians. And while there may be a shift in the balance of power that goes back and forth, the conclusion is already preordained. There will be no Bashar al-Assad in the future of Syria. Now, I can't tell you if it'll be 6 months or 6 years, but the reign of Bashar al-Assad is finished. A man who is responsible for the killing of 400,000 people and the displacement of 12 million people and the destruction of a country has no future in that country. It's as clear as daylight. The challenges we face in Iraq are also because of sectarian policies that were pursued by allies of Iran, who took the country and hijacked it, who sidelined or marginalized major ethnic groups in Iraq, and as a consequence, created the fertile ground for Daesh to operate. You cannot expect to fight Daesh in Syria unless you get rid of Bashar al-Assad, and you cannot expect to fight Daesh in Iraq unless you get rid of the sectarian policies that are enshrined in the Iraqi political system. It's a fact. And you look at Syria, Iran has played a major negative role in it. You look at Iraq, Iran is playing a major negative role in it. So you took a look at the picture and you say, terrorism. We have Hezbollah terrorism, Iran. We have Al-Qaeda terrorism linked to Iran. The board of directors of Al-Qaeda fled to Iran after 9/11, including bin Laden's son. Decisions on terrorist attacks came from those individuals while they were in Iran. The Iranians didn't arrest them, they didn't hand them over. So how can they say they're not involved in terrorism? Daesh was created when Bashar al-Assad released 1,000 extremists from his jail, and Nouri al-Maliki did the same thing. They found their way to Syria, created al-Nusra, which part of it morphed into Daesh. It wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Bashar al-Assad and Nouri al-Maliki, Iran's allies. And then what I find puzzling, and I keep saying this, is that virtually every country in the Middle East has been attacked by Al-Qaeda or by Daesh, except Iran. And Al-Qaeda and Daesh are supposed to be extremist Sunni groups that hate the Shia. Why was Iran never attacked? Because Iran is in partnership with them, I would suspect. We know from the documents that were captured from bin Laden's house in Abbottabad that he had extensive coordination with the Iranians, telling his lieutenants to coordinate with the Iranians, to check with the Iranians. This is not us saying it. This is bin Laden saying it. We know that Imad Mughniya, the chief of operations for Hezbollah, met and coordinated with bin Laden in the early 90s when bin Laden fled and set up shop in Sudan, and that they had worked on doing joint operations in the Middle East. We all know all of this. The documents are all uncovered, and we didn't uncover them. And so you have a situation in Iran, but Iran has no problem trying to smuggle explosives into Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, weapons into Yemen, set up Hezbollah in Lebanon, tried to set up Hezbollah in the Arabian Peninsula, or they called it Hezbollah in the Hijaz, set up Hezbollah in Beirut, set up the Houthis in Yemen. These are all acts of war, essentially. And then yet Iran says, we want to have good relations with you. Fine, stop the aggression and you will have the best relations with us. So that's the challenge, becomes how we deal with Iran and its desire to reestablish its Persian Empire. That is a big challenge for us. We supported the nuclear deal because we were told it prevents Iran from acquiring an atomic weapon. It has intrusive inspections, and it has snapback provisions in case Iran violates the agreement. But now we have to deal with Iran's behavior and how we deal with that. And this idea of Iran is moderate, we don't see it on the ground. Over the last 2 years, when Iran was supposed to be moderate, we've seen more Iranian aggression than in the previous 2 years. How does one explain this? That's a challenge. And we have been working with our allies to try to deter Iran from causing more mischief. And we will continue to do so. And we hope that wisdom will prevail in Iran and that they will come to the realization that they are much better off, and everybody in the region is much better off, if they adhere to the principles of international law, the principle of good neighborliness, the principle of non-interference in the affairs of others. That would transform the world. But we can't do this. We already live by these principles. Iran has to do it. So that's on the Iran issue. I guess I covered the 3 questions, right?
Brussels. I have 2 questions. The first question, Brussels. I have 2 questions. The first question, many journalists are speaking about tensions between, in the relations between United States of America and Saudi Arabia, especially after the last visit of Mr. Kerry to Moscow. Saudi Arabia is still asking for the departure of Bashar al-Assad. What do you think about that? The second question is about, well, now everybody is speaking about Turkey, Iran, Muslim, Sunni, Shia, and all these subjects, but we forget that the main reason of instability in the Middle East is Israel. What's the position of Saudi Arabia towards Israel, who refused King Abdullah initiative for peace, which was agreed by all Arab countries, and now the two-state solution with Mr. Netanyahu seem to be impossible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Other interventions at this point? Yes, sir.
For Said Faqi, I'm from Somalia. I just heard that the minister, His Excellency, said that there is not going to be future for Assad. And I'm wondering, it's almost 6 years, there is killing continuing, and Assad is gaining power. How is the solution of Syria going to happen without the inclusion of Assad? Is this going to just prolong forever and the people of Syria will suffer? Or I think there is only political solution, there is no military solution, and I would like to hear the opinion of His Excellency about what he thinks the Syrian situation will end. Thank you.
Yes, one more? If there not, maybe I can add one of myself. We spoke about the Arab Peace Initiative. There have been a lot of initiatives of an international nature in the attempt to solve the Israeli-Palestinian or Israeli-Arab conflict. The French initiative, there's been a quartet report, there's been an Egyptian approach to encourage bilateral relations, bilateral negotiations. How do you see the operationalization of the Arab Peace Initiative, how this great document that has been long buried would actually be implemented and through which channels?
Let me, in terms of Syria and John Kerry going to Moscow, and in terms of Bashar al-Assad leaving or not leaving, the political process is one that we all want to succeed. The political process based on the Geneva I Declaration and UN Security Council Resolution 2254, which calls for the establishment of an interim governing council that would take responsibility for managing the affairs of the state. A new constitution would be written, elections would be held, and you have a new government that is a permanent government. We all want this. Nobody wants to see one bullet fired. But Bashar al-Assad refuses to go down this path. And so until and unless he does this, the Syrian people will continue to fight him militarily. And more people will die and more buildings will be destroyed. But it's not the Syrian people's fault. It's Bashar al-Assad's fault. And one way or another, as I said, he will leave. Whether it takes another 6 years or another 6 months, there can be no future for a man like this. People said in Bosnia, when the killing was going on, that there is no military solution. There can be no outside intervention. It has to be a political solution. And for years, people were killed. And then the world interceded. There was an external intervention, and it was over very quickly. So, yes, while we may not want to use force, and we don't want force to be the first option or even the last option, we have to be realistic. There are situations where there is no political solution unless you change the balance of power on the ground and make it very clear to Bashar al-Assad that your days are numbered. So make a deal now while you can. So we have attempts to broker a ceasefire, which were tremendously useful, but he didn't abide by it. We had attempts, and we had a Security Council resolution passed to allow for the unfettered access of humanitarian assistance to all areas in Syria, which is wonderful. But he didn't abide by it. We have the Russians saying, let's make a deal where we focus on the terrorists and not the moderate opposition, in exchange for Bashar al-Assad not flying his airplanes. Essentially a no-fly zone. Is he going to live by it? And at what point of him rejecting all the attempts to try to find a resolution, at what point do we say enough is enough? This is not working. I think we passed that point. So that's on Syria. But bottom line is, yes, he will leave. Can you imagine a situation where after all this killing and destruction, the Syrian people will say, oh, Mr. Assad, we're really sorry. Maybe you had a bad day. You can come back and be our president. It's just not going to happen. Somebody else has to come in. That will happen. On the issue of the peace process and the question of Israel, as I mentioned earlier, the Arab-Israeli conflict is the longest running conflict in the Middle East. And what is tragic is it was used by during every conflict we had as justification. Every revolution in the Arab world was done in the name of liberating Palestine. Violence was done in the name of liberating Palestine. Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait and said, I did it for Palestine. It's a conflict that goes beyond the Middle East and reverberates throughout the Islamic world. And the irony of it, it is a conflict whose outlines and whose settlement is clear to everybody. 2 states for 2 people, 67 borders, minor mutually agreed to adjustments, Jerusalem capital for 2 cities, refugees, sharing of water resources, security arrangements. We all know what the settlement looks like. What has been missing is the courage to move in that direction. And it has to do with the politics, not the will of the people. We know that 70% of Palestinians and 70% of Israelis want a 2-state settlement. So we need the leadership to move that along. And we can't have leadership when the politics appeal to the lowest common denominator, which basically means the extremes dominate. With the Arab Peace Initiative, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia wanted to put an initiative on the table to say, here, it's very simple. You can have peace not only with the Palestinians or the Arab, and you can have peace with all the Arabs. And yes, unfortunately, it was not taken up by the Israelis at the time. And frankly, nor was much attention paid to it by Washington. The Arab Peace Initiative is on the table. It gets reconfirmed every year at Arab summits. In 2005, it was adopted by the Organization of Islamic Countries, with more than 50 Muslim countries supporting it and accepting it. Now what we need is, we need to get the parties in a room and to say, here's the end result. Now negotiate the details. That's the missing factor. And when we look at the French initiative, the French initiative was an attempt, and is an attempt, to basically focus attention on this long-standing conflict, to create a sense of what the international community sees as a settlement, which I just outlined, and to try through working groups to essentially define the end game that we know both sides accept and encourage them to move in that direction. The quartet statement is in the same direction. The quartet statement, though, for the first time pointed out the danger of settlement activity. You cannot have a 2-state solution if you're building settlements in the West Bank. And you cannot have a 2-state solution if you're investing in building industries and tourism sites in the West Bank. How are you going to get them out? Makes it more complicated. So we have a fairly small window in which we either move down the path of a two-state solution or we end up with one state. And with one state, there will be challenges in terms of what the state should look like, what its identity should be. And so that's why time is of the essence, and it is important to focus on this issue. And that's why you have the French initiative, the quartet, you have the Egyptian initiative, and we're very supportive of all these efforts, because we think that our region will be much better if we can resolve the longest outstanding conflict in our area.
بعد التحية مباركة طيبة إلى جنابكم والمنظمين أيضا لهذا اللقاء الكريم الذي استفدنا منه كثيرا. سؤالي هو بعد الحوادث الدرامية والدموية التي حدثت في فرنسا عبر شارلي وما حدث في بروكسل وفي العواصم الأخرى، ما هي رأينا أن الأصابع كلها تتجه إلى السعودية، موضع اتهام عن ما يحدث في العالم. ما هي الجهود والترتيبات التي قامت بها المملكة لرأب الصدع وتصحيح هذه الصورة؟ ولماذا لم تكون أيضا جمعية أصدقاء المملكة تكون من علماء وصحفيين وأطباء ورجال أعمال حتى يكون هناك جبهة لمواجهة هذا الإعلام ضد المملكة؟ وبارك الله فيكم.
My name is Shamsuddin and I'm from European Studies Institute, and my question is about migration, which is pushed migration. It's not, nobody is ready to leave their home willingly. So how many pushed migration or so-called refugees Saudi can co-opt or ready to receive, and what kind of assistance Saudi is right now offering to solve the problems of refugees?
Thank you very much. I am consular of the Iranian embassy. Just, I would like to mention some kind of comments, because that when we are going to make a presentation, it's very good that to be based on some kind of the logical matters and based on some kind of the documentaries that shows that we are going to say something that related to the case. Accusing the Iran for everything, I think that is not necessary, and also it's not beneficial for the both countries. I think that when we say that the Al-Qaeda has relation with Iran is completely a joke. We do not forget, and everybody do not forget, that bin Laden is a Saudi citizen and has a strong political and economic relations with inside of the Saudi. I think that everybody does not forget that from the 19 people of the people that committed the 11th of September, 15 people of that 19 was the Saudi citizens. So it seems that, and also now in this room, I think that many people also knows that which country or which countries has supported the Daesh for many years. Just I would like to mention that the things that Minister mentioned here is completely against and opposite to the policy of the European Union leaders and even United States that does have relations with Iran regarding especially the recent cases of the nuclear negotiation. And also there's some kind of the relations that also Iran has with other regional countries shows that Iran also has some kind of the logical policy. Inviting Iran to present in the coalitions that for the things that for them solving the problem in Syria shows that Iran is a main partner for the solving the problem in the Syria. That's all.
Let me take them in order. With regards to people blaming Saudi Arabia, I think when you have terrorist attacks and people are looking for reasons, and they tend to be simplifications, so they figure Saudi Arabia, religious state, must be the reason behind this. We are victims of this extremism and this terrorism. As recently as 10 days ago, we had 3 terrorist attacks in our country by Daesh. We have been on the front lines of fighting terrorists, those who support them, and those who justify their actions. So our record is very, very clear. We work closely with our allies, including here in Belgium, on identifying the mindset and on identifying recruitment and on stopping terrorist attacks. I think the notion that Saudi Arabia is responsible for this ideology is also not born in fact. People say you fund Islamic centers. I tell them name one. Name one. Then they say the one in Brussels. And I say, but your own interior minister did an investigation on it and said there is no extremism in this center. Show me one center that is funded by Saudi Arabia that is extremist and we'll shut it down. We have dismissed thousands of imams from our mosques for being intolerant. If you have any in your country, stop them from preaching. Don't blame others. If they're Saudis, kick them out of the country. We don't have imams that we send to Europe. And so it becomes simple to say, oh, Saudi Arabia, Wahhabis, terrorists, that's where it's all from. And everybody repeats it. And if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes a fact. But then when I say, show me one center, show me one institution, people look at me and go, ah, well, yes. Show me one imam in Belgium who's from Saudi Arabia or who receives funding from Saudi Arabia. Your government pays their salaries. If they're extremist, stop paying them their salaries. But don't blame others. That's how we deal with this problem, by being realistic, not emotional. That's on this issue. Now, if you want, with regards to setting up a group, support group for Saudi Arabia, if you want to take the lead on it, be my guest. I wish there was some. But the other thing to keep in mind is we have to be realistic in the sense that nobody is ever going to praise you all the time. The country that gets criticized the most around the world is the United States. Is it because America is evil? No. I think America is good. But because it has the biggest footprint around the world and is involved in the biggest issues around the world, it's easy for people to criticize. Do we let this affect us? I wish nobody was criticizing Saudi Arabia, but I have to be realistic. There will always be people who take issue with you. And so you live with it. You respond to the charges, you point out the truth, and you hope that people will make up their mind, and most people tend to be reasonable, thoughtful, honest, who will accept the truth. Some you can never convince. And so that's the way we deal with the criticism, is by responding with the truth and let people make up their own mind. The second question was on immigration. I think when we look at the problem of Syria, Syrian immigrants, giving them shelter and putting them in camps and giving them food does not solve the problem. It just delays it. Solving the problem means bring about change in Syria so that they stay in Syria or go back to Syria. The longer they stay in refugee camps, the longer these camps will become breeding grounds for very disaffected, very angry people who can turn towards violent extremism. And so what have we done in Saudi Arabia? We have given billions of dollars to Jordan, to Lebanon, to help them cope with the refugee issues. We have accepted in our own country, since the beginning of the Syrian crisis, 2.4 million Syrians. I think 700,000 or 800,000 still remain in Saudi Arabia. Not one of them is in a refugee camp. Not one of them lives in a tent. Not one of them receives food packages. The custodian of the two holy mosques issued orders that any Syrian in Saudi Arabia would be given resident status, so they can get a job, so they have access to healthcare, and so they can put their kids in public schools. No other country in the world has done this. And so yes, we supported Iraqi refugees by donating $500 million to United Nations organizations in 2014. And the And the mandate was that it go to help displaced people in Iraq, irrespective of their religion, sect, or ethnicity. And those amounts were distributed through 24 UN organizations in Iraq. We support refugee camps through the King Salman Center for Humanitarian Assistance, and we continue to do so. But again, you don't solve the problem of refugees by giving them blankets. You solve it by allowing them to go back to their homes. Otherwise, we're just protracting this problem. Now, on the third issue, the Honorable Consul General from Iran, I didn't say anything that was not based in fact. Doesn't the Iranian constitution say export the revolution? Doesn't the constitution say take care of the Shia, the dispossessed, as you call them? Didn't Iran create Hezbollah? Didn't Iran attack more than a dozen embassies inside Iran in violation of all international laws? We didn't attack them. Iran did. Didn't Iran manage, plan, and execute the 1996 attack in Khobar Towers against the American Marines? Yes, they did. The control officer was Brigadier General Sharifi. You're a military attaché in Bahrain. The bomb maker was Hezbollah. The explosives came from the Bekaa Valley. The top 3 leaders of the plot escaped and have been living in Iran ever since. Isn't that sheltering terrorists? One of them we captured last year in Lebanon with an Iranian passport, not a Saudi passport, even though he's a Saudi citizen. Isn't that aiding and abetting terrorists? We didn't make this up. When the explosions in Riyadh happened in 2003, Saif al-Adil was in Iran along with Saad bin Laden, the chief propaganda person for Al-Qaeda, and 4 or 5 other people, senior leaders. Iran harbored them and protected them. We asked for them to be extradited. It was refused. Some of them are still in Iran. We didn't invent this. This is the fact. The order to blow up 3 housing compounds in Riyadh in 2003 was made by Saif al-Adil, the chief of Al-Qaeda operations, while he was in Iran. We have the phone conversation on tape. We didn't make this up. Ronald Reagan used to say that facts are stubborn things. They are stubborn because we can't get around the fact. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. Attacking embassies is very clear. They don't just blow themselves up. Somebody does it. Killing diplomats. Diplomats don't commit suicide by shooting themselves 3 times. Somebody's responsible. Iranian agents have been linked to terrorist attacks in Europe, to terrorist attacks in South America. We didn't make this up. This is the world. This is evidence. And so, yes, we wish and hope that Iran, a great nation, can be a great neighbor to us. But it takes 2 to tango. It takes willingness to give up this expansionist, aggressive policies and return to international norms and behaviors if you want people to deal with you. And our hand is extended to Iran. It has been for 35 years. But what we get in return are diplomats killed, embassies blown up, terrorists. We have Iranian agents captured in Saudi Arabia for plotting terrorist attacks. We stopped 4 shipments of weapons that Iran was trying to smuggle to the Houthis in Yemen. We have explosives that Iran tried to smuggle into Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait. This is not fiction. And this is not child's play. This is aggressive behavior. This is unacceptable behavior. This is behavior that violates all norms of international behavior and international law. That's why Iran is designated as a state sponsor of terrorism, and that's why Iran is sanctioned for its support of terrorism, not by us, by the international community. So could it be that the whole world is wrong and Iran is right? Could it be that maybe international law that says peaceful relations and non-interference in the affairs of others is wrong, and Iran's approach of aggressively pursuing your objective, irrespective of how you do it, is correct? I don't think so. So if you want a Saudi official to not be critical of Iran, behave in a way that doesn't expose you to criticism. And so far, your history has been one of death and destruction, disregard for international law, and disregard for principles that have existed since the advent of nations, which is good neighborliness and non-interference in the affairs of others.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. My name is Kaysar Hijazin. I am the Secretary General of the Arab Belgium Chamber of Commerce. Allow me to shift from political issue to economic issue, if you allow me, Your Excellency.
Okay.
As everybody knows, the Saudi Arabia economy is the most important economy in the Middle East and the Arab region. And in the vision 2030, I have to see that the GDP of Saudi Arabia will be shifting from the 19th place worldwide, it will be shift to the 15th place. That means Saudi Arabia will be one of the top 15th in the economy in the world. That's very important to the economy in this area. My question is, the competition will be so important in the Saudi Arabia, because you are also shifting from the part of oil and gas depending from 75% of the GDP, you are going to 40% only from the GDP. That means new sectors will be created, a large number of sectors. That means will be a competition for the private sectors. You are looking for the competition will be between ASEAN companies, between EU and the USA, I think. As the EU is the first economic partner of Saudi Arabia, Your Excellency, you think there is large opportunities for the business community for this new plan 2030 in Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
The objective is that we want to diversify our economy from oil, and we want to change the mindset. From an oil producer, like I said, you earn income, you spend it. Price of oil is high, you save some. Price of oil is low, you either cut spending or you take money from your savings. We want to change that dynamic. We want to be an economy that is vibrant, that is innovative, that has a virtuous cycle, that produces jobs and that grows and that is competitive. And that's the philosophy behind Vision 2030. We're looking at sectors that have been underutilized, whether it's mining, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's tourism, whether it's recreation, whether it's technology, whether it's petrochemicals, we're fine, but we want to diversify. And that's what we're trying to do with this vision. We're looking at ways where you increase foreign investment in Saudi Arabia, you increase domestic investment in Saudi Arabia, you open the door for creativity, innovation, production, productivity, so that in turn generates jobs, which generates more wealth, which generate more social stability. That's our objective. In terms of partners, we're looking for partners all over the world. Naturally, there's going to be a large share that goes to European countries or companies and to American companies, and you can pretty much guess which other 4 or 5 countries might have companies that would fit this bill. We're looking for cutting edge, we're looking for innovation, we're looking for new technologies. That's what will drive this vision. And the transformation that it will do to Saudi Arabia is, as you pointed out, we will reduce the percentage of oil in our GDP substantially, increase the percentage of non-oil GDP substantially. We still will have income from oil, but most of it will be a bonus. So we're very optimistic, and I think a lot of countries are very optimistic about this and are very interested in partnering with us in order to avail themselves of investment opportunities as well as profit opportunities. And I think it works both ways.
In that respect, if I may follow up, energy is obviously a concern for the rest of the world. The energy mix is also a concern for the rest of the world because we are facing an adverse effect of hydrocarbons, which is climate change and global warming. And I know that in the project of your country, you have there's an element of that included. So how do you see that happening, and how can a country that is a big energy producer contribute to also this fight against climate change?
When you look at the issue of environment, it transcends nations. Global warming affects all of us, and we all suffer if the environment suffers. So we have a responsibility to do whatever we can in order to do this. In Saudi Arabia, we see ourselves as an energy producer, not an oil producer. An energy producer means solar, it means wind, it means renewable energy, it means clean energy. We have research underway in those areas, and we're partnering up with other institutions around the world in order to take advantage of it. There are tremendous profits to be made in alternative and renewable energy, and we want to avail ourselves of it. So we are moving in this direction, and it is, as you pointed out, renewable energy, clean energy is a major component of our Vision 2030 plan. So that's what we have. I think energy mix, oil will always be important to energy, but at a certain point, the gap in terms of between supply and demand will have to be met by non-oil, because oil is a finite resource and you can only produce so much of it. And just like oil replaced coal in the late 50s, early 60s as the primary source of energy, and here we are 60 years later, coal is still being produced. So there will have to be other energy introduced in order to meet the world's growing demand for energy.
Thank you. There's one of my own, if you allow me to be so arrogant and bold, but I think there's still a player in the room that we have not talked about fully, who is very present and wants to come back to the region, and it's Russia. And we know Russia is also been upsetting a little bit the norms of international order that we thought we were observing since the end of the Cold War. How do you see that? I think, first of all, there's been approaches and outreach from Saudi Arabia. The head of state has been to see the president of Russia. You've had discussions. Russia is also an energy producer. How do you think, how do you analyze the role of Russia, but also at the same time, how can we re-engage Russia to be a more positive player in the places where we don't like what they do?
I think the key is engage. We have our relationship with Russia in terms of the trade and so forth is very, very small compared to the size of our respective economies. It's kind of out of sync. Russia is an oil producer. Russia is also a neighbor. And there's a lot of potential, we think, between not only Saudi Arabia, but the Gulf countries and Russia. But we haven't engaged them much. I think in the UAE, they have been ahead. They have engaged them earlier. There are opportunities for investment in Russia. And so the decision that we have made is, and Russia has more than 20 million Muslims. And so there are a number of areas where one can build a strong relationship with Russia. There are agreements, certain issues that we agree on. Russia's position on the Arab-Israeli conflict has been very supportive of the Palestinians from 1949. We can't deny this, even when they were the Soviet Union. In some areas, we may have disagreements, but so what? We can talk about them, and if we can resolve them, fine. If we cannot resolve them, we put a wall around them and say, let's not have that interfere with our relationship. So we had a number of visits to Russia and Russians to Saudi Arabia. We set up a joint coordinating committee. We pledged to invest up to $10 billion in Russian-Saudi industries. Our objective is if you can engage Russia and give Russia a stake in the Middle East, have strong ties with Russia, that Russia would become a force for stability rather than instability. And we have to test this proposition. And I think the disagreement that we have with Russia has to do with Syria. Not so much the end game, but the tactical, how we get there part. And we cannot let a disagreement like this affect the overall relationship. That would not be realistic. We have disagreements with the United States on Israeli-Palestinian issues from time to time, but it doesn't affect our relationship, the strategic nature of it. So I think if Russia looks at its interest in the Middle East, and I don't want to be presumptuous as to tell them what they are, but it seems to me between the Gulf countries, huge market, huge pool of investments. In fact, if you put together the investment potential, the investable assets of the GCC countries, we're number one in the world. We exceed China. A huge potential. The ability to cooperate on oil, the issue in terms of the links between Islam. I can see how a reasonable Russian strategist can say that's where our interests lie, and not with Bashar al-Assad. And so we're working on the relationship, and trust takes time to build, and relationships take time to build. But our view is that we will move in that direction because it's about building bridges, as I said.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You've been extremely gracious in answering all the questions in a very candid manner. And not only have you answered clearly, but you've given us a lot of food for thought. And we understand and we realize that Saudi Arabia is an essential and central player, not only in the region, but in the world. And we rejoice at the fact that you came to Brussels, that you led your delegation also to meet with your GCC colleague and the EU. And we hope that we will see you often in Brussels because you're certainly a voice for progress and for modernity.
Thank you.